Abrimos una ronda de preguntas, tenemos 10, 15 minutos. Primero allí.
Yes, I enjoyed both papers very much, and I had a question for Lelia, because in your printed title, it referred to Poland specifically, and then in remarks, you spoke of Eastern Europe. Can you give us a little bit more demographic information about who those runaways were? Were most of them from Poland? Were there other Eastern Europeans? Were there maybe even Germans or Western Europeans?
A couple questions for each. For Cecilia, was there a pornographic film industry in Buenos Aires at this time? And then in addition, pornography. In addition, so those cylindrical recording machines in the United States became very accessible in the late 19th century, and initially they were mostly recording other things. So for example, they were recording sounds and voices that people associated with the machine as a kind of a spiritual entity. Is there any of that in Buenos Aires? For Lelia, you know, it struck me that some of your language and how you told the story countered the narrative of varied views. So for example, the idea of disappearing into thin air or women left behind. I mean, presumably sometimes that was negotiated. And that goes to my question, thinking about, for example, the very interesting document you put up from Hinda, where it goes from, you know, pathos and an emotional plea to a very legalistic kind of analysis. I wondered, I don't know if you can answer this, what do you do with that? How do you decide what that document is really trying to achieve or what the real emotion is? Thank you.
Natalia.
Hi. Thank you so much. A question for Lelia. I really enjoyed your talk. But you're talking about men who stayed in the Jewish sphere, in the Jewish arena. Do you have any knowledge about people who, like you say, disappear and started living with shiksas and these horrible things?
Una más, Stephen.
Thank you. I really enjoyed both talks a lot. And first question goes to Cecilia. You're talking about the contribution to nationalism as mediated in a new age, and you describe that very well. But what does it tell us analytically speaking? What is the new contribution here, and how far does ethnic identity play a role, or doesn't it? I mean, is Glucksmann just somebody who's commercializing all these things that are held so holy by the creyentes, no? Or is it his form of inscribing himself as a Jewish migrant into a nationalist discourse? And for Lelia, I was also, and it follows a little bit of what David has just asked, thinking about all those who remain outside of this circuit. And did you ever find in your sources definitions as to who would be considered worthwhile, whose cases would be considered worthwhile to be followed and included? Would they differentiate between, you know, faithful Jews whose cases are valuable enough to spend time on also, or how did that work? Also, was there a commercial aspect to that, or was it only a benevolent commitment?
Respondemos y luego la sopa se enfría. Cecilia, por orden de...
Yes, about the first question, I don't know if there was a pornographic film industry. I can take a look, but I haven't seen it. Yeah? Okay. And about recordings that were not of music, yes, there were. I deal with that in my dissertation. I didn't include it in this presentation, but so the way I see it, it's very important to take into account that it was not clear what the uses of these technologies were to be at the beginning, and the fact that it ended up being, that the phonograph ended up being mostly for music reproduction is something that was defined by the way that users appropriated it, and also how it was linked to, it was somehow a continuity of the piano in the homes, and very much linked to how this had a function in defining the private sphere, house entertainment, and etc. And it ended up being very much associated to music, but that was not at all obvious at the beginning. And I think actually political speeches are still being recorded. That's very important. So the other uses do remain throughout this period. Thank you, Stefan, for your question. What is new in looking at nationalist discourse in this way? I think it first allows to see how some concepts work in a way in one context and different in the other one. So I don't think that like criollo in the nationalist discourse means the same when you look at it in the different media it was circulating. And I think it adds a layer to the complexity of this concept and what it meant as something that, well, it was the function that it had to agglutinate broad sectors of the society into a shared identity. So I think also that the record industry, one doesn't usually think that there is where you will find an intellectual or a discourse at all. But at the same time, it was very broad as a consumption and as a cultural consumption. So it also brings audiences that maybe were not interested in reading the other media. That's also especially written words. But also I'm exploring that, I can't really say, but I think that the technological aspect was also a way of saying what was it possible to say and what not. I think it also adds some limitations. So it adds a way of reaching more people, but it also imposes a limit on how messages can be formulated. But that's something I'm trying to give a shape to. So what are the technological bases for formulating and spreading a discourse? And about the role of Glucksmann and whether ethnicity plays a role, I think, well, I'm not sure yet whether to bring in more the role of Jewish institutions, because that was a bit so left aside in my research. Until now I was focusing on him as an entrepreneur, but now that I was looking at the documentaries he made in this film about the Hospital Israelita, it says that they name one of the parts Centenario because it was made on the centenary of the Argentine independence, etc. And the fact that this was recorded in film and showed, I think it was, following that mission of placing Jewish institutions as part of the society. But I wouldn't say that Glucksmann, I think he navigated between the two, so his own agenda and maybe his personal, not agenda, but like, goals as a Jewish migrant, with a very strong and effective commercial logic, which should also not be underlooked. And I think
There's something parallel between his trajectory and the trajectory of the pioneer of the radio broadcasting at the time, Jaime Yankelevich.
Yeah.
Also brought new technologies into Argentina and also played on
Exactly, yeah.
contributing to the nationalist repertoire.
Yeah. He comes a bit later, so that's why I don't look at them. It's definitely important for me to say that Glucksmann was not exceptional, so I don't argue for an exceptionality of the case, but rather on the contrary. And he was definitely not the only one, so you can find precedents before and especially after and in other industries. So maybe the answer to that question would be more on placing him among other actors. Yeah, thank you for that. I will approach it that way.
Gracias, Cecilia. Lelia.
you so much. Yeah, okay. I think I'll start with Stefan's question. Thank you very much. Well, regarding the ones left outside the circle, it's very interesting because, as I understand it, the men that they are searching, they are unaffiliated Jews in Buenos Aires. So, but they have, on the one hand, they want to aid Eastern European women, like specifically, and to solve their plight. But at the same time, they are very aware that the new relationships are causing problems in family and marital life in Buenos Aires. So besides negotiating between couples, they also imply. During the 1920 and 1930, they have like several restrictions regarding Jewish marriage. Each man should present himself in Ezrat Nashim in order to get married within the Jewish community. So they are acting in these two parallel spaces. So that's for I hope that I answered your answer. And I don't know if it's very hard to tell when you read the file, because you have a file of 90 pages and you have a file of 30 pages and you have a file of 20 pages, and it's very hard to know why they stopped locating for some men and for other but they're very persistent. I mean, for example, I have one case that they were searching a husband for 2.5 years, and they didn't find him. And then after 5 years, you have like they reopened the file because that specific husband wanted to get affiliated with an institution, and then they said, we know that, we know you, we got you. And so it's very difficult to know what are like their specific intentions in each case. Regarding Atalia's questions about shiksas in Buenos Aires, yeah, not that many, but yes, I have not so many cases with Jewish husbands that are living with an Argentinian or Christian woman. I think the three cases that I know they are living outside of Buenos Aires, if that helps. And for David, Hinda's letter. I was wondering the past couple of days how to read Hinda's letter out loud. Well, this letter is one letter among many letters, and this file is something like 120 pages. It's very long treatment. It was handled for many years. And Hinda's specifically at the end of her story is that she immigrated to Argentina, and then after 1 year, she applied for, she came back to Ezrat Nashim. This time she presented herself, not from appealing from Warsaw. And she said that he abandoned her again and moved outside of Buenos Aires. So reading her entire case files and reading her, she made many, many efforts in order to immigrate to Argentina. And yeah, her husband finally sent her the documents, but she made her journey by herself, and yeah, it's a question of the interpretation, my interpretation, and how I will read it. But I wanted to read it the way I read it because I know her case very from from the beginning till the end. So I hope this answers.
Gracias, Lelia.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm standing. I think it's in my opinion, the right way to read it. And regarding the first question, well, it's not like a Jewish phenomenon. There is nothing Jewish about it. I read papers that deal with husband desertion from among Italians in Buenos Aires. So I chose the Polish case because, well, most of the case files are detailing immigrants from Poland, and I think it makes sense because when they started dealing with family and marital life, the Polish immigrants were the most frequent immigrants in Jewish community, the largest group. And when the German arrived, the Ezrat Nashim was very busy with the prostitution. So I don't think that they had time to deal with Germans. But it's probably we can find if we read Tara Zara's book, for example, she talks about Germans also and from the Habsburg Empire that were and yeah. So.
Gracias, Lelia. Estamos sobre la hora. Si hay alguien que tiene esas preguntas como en la iglesia, que la diga ahora, que calle para siempre, pero corta y concisa.
La percepción de Glucksmann como un gran aporte contribuyó a la cultura popular. No necesariamente esa percepción fue la de a ojos de la cultura argentina, la de un judío. De la misma manera, y esa es la pregunta que te hago, si consideras que el caso Glucksmann se podría asociar al caso, por ejemplo, de Julio Korn, el gran introductor de la novela popular y de la literatura popular en los años 20, y yo diría también Yankelevich, en la radio.
Gracias. Es la última respuesta.
¿Qué? Sí. Perdón, la pregunta es si son comparables a esas figuras y por otro lado si su contribución... Si es que si se asocia que la percepción tiene algo de judío, digamos, su contribución. Es una pregunta difícil. Sí y no. O sea, yo creo que en realidad sobre todo su rol en el tango, por ejemplo. En todas las historias sobre el tango judío, él no aparece tan prominentemente, porque no hay una impronta de, digamos, de un contenido judío en el tango, de una relación del tango con la identidad judía. Él tiene una función o sea, creo que él tiene un rol importante en la operación que convierte al tango en una música nacional, pero al menos en lo que yo vi, y tampoco es... O sea, a veces sí se lo retoma en estas historias del tango judío, pero porque era un judío en el tango, ¿no? O sea, como en este enfoque de los judíos en el tango, sí, pero no en la idea de un tango judío. Por ejemplo, ahí sería un elemento donde no está presente. Pero por otro lado, sí era, digamos, de público conocimiento y tenía un rol político muy importante como judío y como dirigente de la comunidad judía, que se articula con su rol de productor cultural. O sea, las dos cosas van juntas y se van, digamos, cruzando y alejando, y él se mueve en esos dos campos. Así que... y sí es percibido, digamos, me da la impresión, como parte de este grupo, y quizás eso conecta con la segunda pregunta, que esto se ha trabajado, ¿no? en los estudios judíos en Argentina, como este grupo de empresarios culturales judíos que tienen una función que se ha llamado como modernizadora del campo cultural. Yo no me metí tanto en esa discusión porque no me pareció como la categoría analítica más importante para mí, esta idea de una modernización del campo cultural, pero definitivamente forma parte de este grupo, un grupo quizás con fronteras informales, ¿no? No un grupo definido como tal, pero que tienen, digamos, un compromiso con la cultura judía, pero también con la cultura nacional, por lo menos. Con la cultura popular, sí. Sí.
Muchas gracias, Cecilia. Puedes seguir en el almuerzo. Muchas gracias a las dos participantes.